Today, I wanted to watch a YouTube video titled The Two Types of Programmers Together. I did not pre-watch this video, but it looked really interesting. So let's go ahead and take a look.
There are two types of programmers, and I believe that every single programmer can fit in between these two types.
Okay, strong claim. Let's see if I can put myself somewhere on this line by the end of this video.
From your favorite influencers all the way to your open source contributors. So on one side of the spectrum, we have the craft-based programmer, and some key traits include caring extremely about code quality and maintainability, wants the most optimal solution to things, very much advocates for technologies that are tried and tested, willing to go extra steps to implement something on their own, is passionate about the craft of programming. And you often see the craft-based programmers as open source maintainers, low-level programmers, code reviewers, etc. The level of care that goes into this profession is often extremely selfless and goes unnoticed. If you have such passion towards the craft of programming, you want to be able to find the most optimal solution to make sure the code that you're writing is the most performant. And a good example is from the man himself, Linus Torvalds. After getting a pull request for networking code, Linus got annoyed about how overly complex the code was. Christ, people, this is just the conflict I get is due to stupid new GCC header file crap. But what makes me upset is that the crap is for completely bogus reasons. Maybe annoyed is an understatement. There's a lot of programmers that are like this, but we'll come back to them in a bit because we're going to get to the second type of programmer. On the other...
Interesting take so far. I have met and worked with software engineers that I think fall into that category, but let's see if there is some overlap.
Other side of the spectrum, we have the result-based programmer, cares more about the end product, wants the most fastest to develop solution, can be experimental in latest and greatest technologies, happy to use existing solutions online, and is passionate about what the program creates. And you often see result-based programmers as startup employees, ship bros, content creators. The key here is speed, but not for you, but for me. Speed is the game. The programming is just another block that needs to be checked off that checklist. Often the priorities lie in hitting goals or creating something while maintaining it later on. These types of programmers often enjoy programming as a product of enjoying business or software. And there's many examples. One is Mark Zuckerberg.
I think between those two, I fall somewhere in between. When I first started working in enterprise software, I was very much critical of all the things that were quote unquote not done correctly. But as my career progressed, I realized that the technically correct way isn't always the correct way from the big picture perspective. My view on this have shifted from the first type of perfectionist programmer to more of let's get this done, let's make sure it delivers the most business value at the end of the day. If you go too far in any direction, it becomes almost annoying to other people around you. And really the middle kind of shifts depending on the needs of that specific product and where it is in its life cycle. So it's all about finding that balance.
Zuckerberg with his infamous move fast and break things mentality, which in 2014 changed to move fast with stable infrastructure. Maybe he slid a little bit on that scale. Another example could be
companies grow, right? And as they grow, more and more people end up relying on that product. And it becomes more difficult to just break things because it actually has a very negative effect on the bottom line at the end of the day. On the product maturity scale, on the left side, if you have a brand new MVP, and on the right side, old, stable, boring product. And then on this axis, we're going to put number of users who rely on your product. As you grow, it becomes more and more important to have stability and not break things. Because maybe your first 1,000 users here, you're solving a very specific niche kind of problem for them that are willing to put up with a lot of bugs and issues. But as you get bigger and more people who don't care about your product as much are using it, you really don't want to have outages. For example, talking about Facebook here as an example in this video, when it started out here, I think people like me were like some of the early adopters in using Facebook. And by the time we're here, A bunch of businesses are relying on Facebook as well. If there was an outage somewhere in the beginning, it really didn't matter that much. It's okay, cool, like I'll come back to refresh the page in an hour. But now it would cause a lot more issues for some of the businesses that rely on Facebook and the Messenger and Facebook Marketplace. Some people have built businesses just around Facebook alone. So you really can't just have a massive outage for a long time anymore. I think this is just a natural progression of software in general. Over time, it needs to be more boring and stable. But in the beginning, it's okay to break more things and build faster. And as a software developer in a professional environment, you're going to find yourself somewhere on this timeline. This part of the job is figuring out where you are and how important is stability versus shipping features fast.
DHH, who advocates for programmer happiness and not over-engineering solutions.
I can do whatever the hell I want, live wherever I want, buy whatever I want. That is the lifestyle. That's true. I think that's good.
So now that you know the two types of programmers, which one is better? This is where the debate always happens online, and it can't ever be solved because we have huge competing philosophies. And of course, this isn't binary. It's a sliding scale. On the extreme end of the result-based side, you have prompt engineers who care so little about coding, they don't even want to write code. And on the other side, you have Terry Davis, who literally rewrites everything from scratch and only has one user he cares about. Literal God. For me, I am a content creator. I am definitely more on the results side of things. I make videos and software purely for the entertainment of the viewer.
Hey there, Tony. I'm totally stoked to discuss capitalism with you. Listen, SpongeBob, you're a good kid. I get it. You're optimistic, you flip your burgers, and you think capitalism is this big Krabby Patty cook-off.
And to be honest, I would throw 90.
And that's a really good point. As a content creator, if you're just like building a project for fun and for entertainment purpose on YouTube, and it's not really going to be used by a bunch of people, you're right here. The uptime matters not at all. So that makes a lot of sense.
80% of the dev content creators on this side with me. Do you care about programming or do you care about software? When I was on Twitter a while back, I saw a thread that really defined these two competing philosophies absolutely perfectly. This tweet right here talks about the service Postmark, which helps you automate email delivery in your software apps. It mentions how after being acquired, the quality has dropped dramatically with an SSL certificate expiring, causing outages for most users. Then popular Twitter user Levels.io said that they won't resend emails for 8 hours of downtime and that it would result in chargeback to his application. Then Matteo Kalina came in and said, this is the reason why we put sending emails behind a queue. If sending fails, those jobs would be queued up and be retried, which Levels replied with, fair, but you're blaming the customer for a problem of their business. Last tweet, I promise. Ultimately, the service level agreement of your app is your problem. The vendors you chose is your decisions and trade-off. With email specifically, it's an absolute nightmare to deal with. So using a third-party app that has all these systems set up for you just makes sense as a result-based programmer because it helps you just get things done much faster. Although yes, Postmark is to blame for an outage, it's hard to justify to your customers that someone else did something wrong. So having to spend more of your time to create a backup of something that seems like it could never fail is counterintuitive to your philosophy of programming. Now we see the pitfall.
This is also pretty true. Let's say you're relying on a cloud provider. And recently, I have some projects hosted in Python Anywhere, and they had an outage for, 20 minutes or something like that. It was scheduled. But nonetheless, if you have a bunch of customers relying on your product, let's say they're sending emails or logging something all the time that needs to be up as close to 100% of the time as possible, really the blame is on you there because they don't care that your infrastructure has an outage. They just want your product to solve a problem for them. And for that 20 minutes, it did not solve their problem. Ultimately, I do think that it falls on the developers and the team around the actual solution.
Of the result-based programmer pretty clearly. However, the opposite end can have some negatives too. In 1997, Netscape released version 4 of their browser and got started immediately on version 5, which ended up just going to version 6. With years of technical debt behind them, the team decided to do a complete rewrite of the source code to better optimize the browser. Issue is, it took forever. and it took 3 whole years to release the update. By then, their market share had crumbled. Optimizations that they thought people would enjoy went unappreciated because people just forgot about them. They were already moved on. Joel on Software says that it's harder to read code than to write it, which is a reason why programmers are quick to throw out their old code. At what point do you just say, you know what? It's good. Let's ship it. So throughout this video, you've probably seen one side as the absolute gigajad and the other side as the wojak, but there really is no better side in all of this. In fact, I think despite the clashing philosophies, a lot of the time they rely on one another. Hear me out. When speed of development is a high priority for the result-based programmers, you have to rely on the battle-tested software that has been optimized and fine-tuned for years and years.
Very good point. If you want to develop software fast that doesn't fail all the time, you do need to rely on things that are robust and have been battle tested, at least under the hood. And then you could build some of the smaller things on top of that.
You can't just build a Linux, Redis, Django, SIMD, JSON in like a weekend. But for craft-based programmers, validation from users is also extremely important to constantly improve the software that you're building. When result-based programmers start using the craft-based programmers projects, they're able to validate the features and help in terms of feedback for the projects in a real-world scenario.
That's also a really good point, because even people who develop really fast and just want to ship things for the business value are still relying on the battle-tested, proven tech under the hood, somewhere below. And then there'll also be the ones that will be opening pull requests, bug fixes, and stuff like that, contributing and giving feedback to those who did develop the open source software under the hood. I think it's a really interesting way to look at that.
At a hot take where if you're using JavaScript, PHP, Python, or whatever dynamic programming language, then you automatically are in the result-based area. However, after being a bit more critical, I'm a little torn because it really just is turtles all the way down. If you run the sorted built-in function in Python, it's just a C function with a highly optimized power sort algorithm. If I were to make claims that a craft-based programmer would rather write it themselves, then I would be an idiot, and so would the person wanting to rewrite it.
Also, like, you got to pick the right tool for the job. That is one of the fundamental things that you need to do as a software developer. You can technically write a website and C, but why would you do that when you can use Django? So there is definitely levels to this, and it really comes down to picking the right tool for the job. And I think going off the tool alone and saying, oh, if you use Django and Python to build a backend for a service, you're results-oriented person. Ultimately, I don't think it's fair to say that if somebody chose a specific tech stack, you could put them in either or camp. You need to understand the broader goal and the problem that they're solving to make that judgment. I don't believe the tech stack is an indication in itself of where you fall on this spectrum.
For whatever reason. So if we take the diagram right here, at what point do we identify the result-based programmer or the craft-based programmer? Can you have both that exist within the same level? Could we literally take our scale, flip it 90 degrees, and then just paste it there? I don't know, maybe. This is where all of this comes with a bit of irony. The result-based programmer has become a valuable market opportunity. Take email. It's terrible to implement, so companies offer to handle it for a monthly fee. You just write 2 lines of code and move on with your day until it's broken. But here's where things get very interesting. Look at Astral. They're building Python tooling in Rust, like UV and Rough, which embodies this craft versus results subject. They're using Rust, which traditionally is craft-based, to make better tools for Python, which traditionally is result-based. And while they're open source, they've raised $4 million in venture capital. They're using deep technical craft in order to build products that are faster for result-based programmers to program in and ship faster. So it's interesting for sure. So if this was a scale, where would you fit in all of this? Let me know in the comments. And if you agree or disagree with my whole entire analysis here, then please let me know in the comments why, react to it, whatever you want to do. Peace out, coders.
Yeah, I think this is a really good take overall. And I think, as I alluded in the beginning of the video, in the beginning, I fell into this category, trying to do everything by the book. But over time, I've realized that really the right place to be somewhere in the middle, and you really have to make individual decisions on each project and each problem that you're solving on where you want to fall on this line. Not every project is going to be the same. Not every problem is going to be the same. And although I think the stake here is interesting, where he flipped all the technologies like that, and some of them are on the result side, some are on the craft side. I can't agree with this. I don't think this is a good take because, again, you have to evaluate every single solution to a problem on its own merit and not just think about, oh, okay, if you use this piece of tech here, then you're automatically a results-based programmer, right? You don't want to replicate work. If a specific tool solves your problem all the way, it's intended to be used in that way, then there's nothing wrong with using that tool. There's no reason to go below in that stack just because you think you belong in a craft camp. Lewis, thanks for posting this video. I think it's a really interesting take on this. It definitely got me thinking, and I'm gonna like and subscribe.